Hail, citizens of the fight sphere. It is I, your President Scott Coker. No, it's me, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By Podcast, episode 219. Coming at you on Monday the 27th of July. And that was it. That's the end of Fight Island and the birth of the Bellator Fight Sphere, which is a Dave & Buster's that they put curtains down the middle of to separate off sections. We're going to be talking Whittaker Till. We're going to be talking about Herb Dean's dreadful stoppage and beef with Dan Hardy, and the stuff that happened on that card. But I think the most pressing piece of news for everyone this week was that Roy Jones and Mike Tyson are going to have a boxing match. And they're both 50... No, Roy Jones is 52 and Tyson's like 56. I didn't realise they were so close in age, actually, because Roy boxed professionally for like 15 years after Mike. But this is just, I mean, if you need to sum up to anyone, what is the most shit about combat sports generally? It's this feel-good story where we had Mike Tyson. Everyone was worried about Mike Tyson because he was getting fat and he was depressed and he's always had mental health issues. And we were all like, oh, that's not good. And then he started, getting in shape again. And then there were some films of him on the mitts with Rafael Cordero, hanging out with Francis Ngannou and all sorts of other stuff. And everyone was like, oh, what a great feel-good story. Mike Tyson's back in shape and he's dealing with his mental demons as well. And then because it's combat sports, we had to take that a step further and try and book him into a serious fight at the age of 56. That's fighting. It takes even the best bits of feel-good puff news and turns them to absolute shit. Does mean that nearer the time we get to do some stuff on like the careers of Mike Tyson and Roy Jones and how exciting their matchup would have been in the 90s. But just generally, it's exploitative bollocks as always. Speaking of which, if you didn't see the soccer mum on the Golden Boy card this weekend, well worth a watch. Just a lass who had no idea what she was doing, like hands out in front of her, Mendoza style, and gets immediately knocked out with the first combination. Which is what's going to happen in MMA. You're going to see a lot more of that sort of matchmaking if you keep going on about the combined records of the UFC champions being better than ever. Because they'll start running them up to 25-0 before they even come to the UFC. Update on All In on Coker. Actually, I should have won. The decision in the Taiwan Claxton versus JJ, whatever his name was, fight was pretty garbage and suspect. But I did say this was a pretty close card matchup-wise. But again, all the favourites did win except the one who was robbed on the scorecards. Not bad in terms of All In on Coker demonstrating a point. But I won the money back, that £3, by betting on Trinaldo over Herbert and parlaying that with Carla Esparza going to decision because you can count on that. High-level betting takes from Slacky J over here. I should have parlayed Betch Kohea going to decision as well. But even that looked sketchy for a minute when she decided to stop fighting with 10 seconds left to go in the first round. Though, as terrible a fighter as Betch Kohea is, it was pretty endearing that she got smashed, tied up, and then as soon as the referee broke them for the actual end of the round, was like, you've got to fight till the bell. She was just like, sorry. Like, you don't have to apologise for you getting smashed in the face. So last night at Fight Island, nobody fought on the beach. As far as I know, they didn't all get naked and run into the sea at the end of it. And they didn't even play Pomp and Circumstance and selected sea shanties. So it was a very disappointing night all in all. But the fights were okay. The ones that I watched out of the 15 fucking fights on the card. So obviously you'll probably hear either about the terrible stoppage or about the boy versus boy main event. Darren Till, who has become the funniest and soundest lad in MMA since getting his hype train derailed, and Robert Whittaker, everyone's beloved boy, coming back from a brutal loss and a loss of motivation. He if you haven't read the story about I can't remember who wrote it. I'm bigging it up, so I hope it's not Kevin Ioli, but it's a good story where basically it was advertised as like Robert Whittaker finally reveals the reason for his absence. Because if you remember a few months ago, people were convinced that his daughter had leukemia or something or needed a bone marrow transplant, and Dana White was like, this actually happened. They were interviewing Dana White and they asked about Robert Whittaker, and Dana White was like almost in tears saying like, if you want to talk about what a real person is, Robert Whittaker's a real person. So everyone was like, well, that seems like it makes sense because Dana White's a sociopath and he's almost in tears talking about it. But as it turned out, like Robert Whittaker, the story, which you should read, was talking about how he like runs 37 sand dunes in a session when he goes out on the dunes, which you'll have seen like the city kickboxing boys do too, sprinting up the dunes. But he said it was on Christmas Day and he stopped halfway through and was just like, why the fuck am I doing this? So he took some time off, hung out with his family, and for training this fight, apparently took Sundays off, which, I mean, a lot of fighters already do, but that should tell you how insane his training regime was already. So you could definitely understand why he was getting burnt out. So yeah, terrific to see them both back in action. I'm going to big it up again because a lot of the stuff we talked about in the tactical guide for the Patreon boys played out in this one. We were talking about, all the lead leg harassment, both the outside low kick, the side kicks to the lead leg, and picking up the single on the lead leg. He didn't use as many post singles as I wanted to see, but he did do some interesting variations, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And Till, didn't look altogether bad, I thought. Looked decently strong in the clinch, looked sharp on the feet, but was really hampered by the fact that he let Whittaker get after his lead leg, and he refused to pick it up and change his stance or adapt, and he didn't have much success coming back on the kicks and making Rob pay for them. There was a lot of classic Whittaker, the stuff that can get him into trouble. I always talk about how he has a lovely jab and he does well in the pocket, but it's the bursting over range. He will lead with his face. I mean, he's very good at bursting over range. Like I was watching it going, he might be the fastest white man alive because he's very good at getting in quick, but he does always do it head first. And if you saw like the very first round, Till timed him coming in, knowing that his head was going to be low, hit him with an elbow and dropped him to his back. And the rest of the first round was basically Whittaker just shaking off the cobwebs and having to try and keep Till off him. And you saw some of that Whittaker survival instinct where he backs himself onto the fence, plants his back foot, and throws like side teeps out with both forearms on his head. But in the tactical guide before this fight, I talked about how Till, particularly against Gustafsson, has adopted like a longer stance recently, tends to squat down more in his stance, whereas if you watch his early UFC fights, he was doing a lot of lightly leg stuff, which was part of the Muay Thai and MMA thing, but he was also doing a lot of like withdrawing his leg from low kicks and making people look silly, and that's always good. Because back when Till got into the UFC, everyone was still obsessed with checking low kicks instead of just taking your leg away from them. But in standing longer, he can slide back and come back in with the left hand more easily, and he can squat down and grab underhooks in clinches like he did against Gastelum, kept ducking into clinches. And I was saying, that does present the lead leg. Gastelum was able to throw left low kicks constantly, but Gastelum's a southpaw, so Whittaker would have to use the lead leg and step up into kicks like that. And I specifically said he could do that with calf kicks, but it does take a step up. You don't see a lot of people doing it very well. The most obvious example is Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen constantly does the step up calf kick. He's coming in at like ankle level on the lead leg, and he just mauls people with it. It's really quite impressive when you see it. And then Whittaker did it. He came out and he was stepping like little T-step into outside low kick, and he was able to really punish Till's lead leg with that. The one that really like hurt Till's lead leg was the Whittaker sidekick thing. Low line sidekicks are great when you are southpaw versus orthodox versus southpaw, open stance matchup, because your lead knees and feet are already almost on each other, so you just have to pick it up and put it down on top of the opponent's knee, and add a bit more stank to it if you want to do some real damage. But what Whittaker will do, and was doing against Yoel Romero and Israel Adesanya, has been doing in recent years, is throwing the side kick across himself. So he'll go orthodox versus orthodox and throw the left side kick into the opponent's left leg. So he's almost turning his back to the opponent, like in terms of the right hand coming back at him, which is very strange, but he has made it work, and it does seem to throw people off. But here, he's an orthodox fighter anyway, most of the time, and he's fighting Till, who's a southpaw fighter, all of the time, and he decided to switch to southpaw just to throw the side kick across himself, which was really interesting, but he managed to buckle Till's knee in. Shout outs to John Gooden, because I thought he did a really good job, because like this whole Fight Island thing, it's been weird experiencing like when everyone can hear everyone else. That's been odd and interesting, certainly. And you've had those fun moments like when Ricky Simone heard Daniel Cormier saying that he was looking big and did the flex and stuff. And that's good fun. But the commentators have been having an impact on the fight. Like there was a fight where DC was basically coaching one of the fighters in the wrestling exchanges along the fence. And I'm sure it influences the judges when they can hear every time that Michael Bisping shouts, "Oh, he's hurt," even when he's not. But I thought John Gooden did a very good job when they were, because Till said to his corner, "My lead leg is janky as fuck. I can't move around on it properly." And John Gooden was whispering into the mics, "I think we've got an injury in the Till corner, blah, blah, blah." He wasn't saying it so that Whittaker could hear it and then go and just ruthlessly go after the lead leg, which he did. But, had he heard that it was injured and a liability to that point that he was talking to his corner about it, Whittaker could have just gone ham after that leg instead of mixing it up as he did throughout the rest of the fight. So I think a lot of respect is due to John Gooden for a level of professionalism that no one has had to really do before. No one has had to commentate in an arena with no one in where they can hear everything you say and consider that before. And he seems to be the first one out of everyone who's broadcasted from there to pick up on that and say, okay, well, I'm not going to give one fighter an unfair advantage here, and announce it to the judges if they can't hear it from the corners already. Sound lad, that John Gooden. I've always liked him. Whereas Felder's comedy hour, can we just give him like 5 minutes at the start to monologue and then carry on with the event and no jokes for the rest of it? We're getting to like Bellator. I say that, but Bellator was back this week and I listened to it for like 5 minutes, and it is just Goldie and Big John talking about what they've been up to like recently. You're going, lads, there's two guys fist fighting and you're being paid to talk about it. Why am I still hearing about the size of dogs and the fight of the size? But anyway, as we were talking about getting Till up out of his stance or just punishing the leg if he refuses to come up out of his stance, I talked about post singles. You didn't see many of those, but you did see Rob entering with the right hand, putting his head in Till's chest and picking up the lead leg. And he was doing it and then coming up and then dropping the leg and coming back with overhands and stuff like that, which I really liked. And then when he got cut in the final round, he just went after the leg and took him down. So obviously he was holding something back on those attacks and just using it to mix things up. And Till said this in the post-fight. He was like, yeah, he really mixes things up well and keeps people confused. And I think, like, I was watching this and going, there's still some stuff here that concerns me. If he fights Adesanya again, or if he's going to be gunning for another shot at Adesanya if he's staying at middleweight. The leading with the face stuff is still there. But again, he was able to do that a lot more comfortably in this fight and more safely because he could hide his head on the outside of Till's lead shoulder because they were in an open stance matchup the entire time. Whereas Rob switches and Izzy switches. So, and Izzy will switch on the retreat. So he's turning from even if you start in an open stance, he's turning it into a closed stance and loading up the lead hook as a counter. So yeah, it makes it very complicated, whereas Till is a one stance fighter and you could just slide your head down the outside. And if you saw after he got elbowed, Whittaker started dropping on head outside singles and also like full on level change into double legs on the offside. So yeah, that was good. I think the amount of single legs and things that he was picking up, particularly by the third round, he was attacking them like several times around, which is good. And that's what you would want to see against Israel Adesanya because Whittaker does not have all the kickboxing experience that Adesanya does. Adesanya is very good in the clinch too, but Whittaker does have this remarkable ability to pick up wrestling, and yet he's not really been using it offensively in his fights. And if he could use it more offensively in his fights, that would be terrific. And again, like wrestling offensively is different in MMA and in wrestling, but if you're good enough to go out and make points happen in wrestling competitions as a wrestler when the guys are all bent over at the waist with their lead arm down on their thigh, denying you the shot altogether, then you're good enough to box into a good shot in MMA, especially if you are already a decent striker. So ultimately, I thought some rust on Whittaker, and I thought Till looked good when he caught him very early, but really found the thing that was out there and that I'd written loads about, just saying, this is the thing that I would target. And then Whittaker just went after it relentlessly. Really interesting in that he picked up the takedowns just to land shots. And then the one time that he did spend a lot of time in top position, that came off a knockdown. And that's kind of how it's been in the UFC for Whittaker. He's very good on top and he'll hold people down and beat them up. But he tends to just get put there by the opponent, either by knocking them down or like Uriah Hall lost his fight to Whittaker because every time he tried to spin, Whittaker would just stick to his back, and then it'd be like back body lock, and you go, okay, well, now I'm climbing on your back or I'm dragging you onto the ground. It was never like he had to set anything up and make the takedowns happen. But good to have him back. So when we were looking down this card, one of the ones that was exciting me was Jai Herbert versus Francisco Trinaldo. And, I've been a long time Trinaldo fan here. I think now we've got to do something on him because he's got an interesting bag of tricks and he's just a really wily, savvy old fucker. I was watching the first round and I was going, yeah, this guy's getting a Filthy Casuals guide at some point, maybe when he retires. But he's one of those guys like Emmanuel Augustus, maybe not Emmanuel Augustus because he's got a much better record than certainly. I don't want to get tied up in records, but Emmanuel Augustus or Jersey Joe Walcott or any of those clever old timers in boxing, they had a harder time getting the regular fights and the pay that Trinaldo has been able to. Trinaldo can fight fairly regularly against good competition and make it his full-time job, which is good. Great. Love that for Trinaldo. But what he is very tricky. And he's got a bag full of tricks. He doesn't bring something new for every opponent, but he does have enough stuff that he can sort of dig into different weaknesses in different opponents. And I thought he was really, really slick here. Jai Herbert, we'd been talking about last week because I watched all his Cage Warriors fights in the lead up to this, and I thought he was very interesting. I said that he's just 1-2s and stand-ups, and he's very hard to keep down and very hard to keep along the fence. Good knees and good head posts and good breaks along the fence. He's from the same gym as the Edwards brothers and Tom Breeze, so very strong in the clinch. But it just shows you how far you can get on a 1-2 if you do it well. Because if you watch him, like, time and time again, it's not like he's hitting dudes really, really hard, but he is finding their unprotected chin every time. Like, straight off the bat, he just goes boop, like, right on the chin. It doesn't always look like he's even turning all his hips and shoulders into it. He's just putting his fist on the guy's chin. And then they'll just start wobbling and fall over and he'll follow up. And he's really, really good at it. Astonishingly accurate is how I describe him with his right hand. Now, last week we were talking about how that might be interesting because I have not seen him against a lot of southpaws and certainly not a lot of dangerous southpaws or southpaws as dangerous as Trinaldo. Trinaldo is very good at timing a counter left hand, so he'll throw his left arcing over the top of the opponent's right straight, because when you're in a southpaw versus orthodox matchup, obviously the rear leg, rear hand, you can line him up a little bit easier, so it becomes like it's kind of quick draw. You've got the power weapons in place. If you just take a little step, you can throw it off the bat. And what Trinaldo was able to do in this fight was he backed Herbert up immediately. He was using round kicks to the body to try and herd him, and wide left hooks to the body with his rear hand. And those were also really upsetting Herbert, because Herbert's a tall, thin, rangy lightweight. I didn't realize how much taller he was than Trinaldo, but Trinaldo came in heavy for this one, which might have been a tactical decision because he's never had trouble before. But he did seem to slow down hard, so it might not have been a great tactical decision. Might have done the Alex Oliveira, just come in 10 pounds heavy, just so you can ragdoll the guy. But he herded him to the fence really well, hit him with a nice left straight as he was circling back round in that direction, in front of the shoulder, lovely stuff. Entered the clinch, and then he was doing those beautiful outside trips. It's very basic takedown that guys just attempt over and over again. It's like Usman does it all the time. You use your head, and you get the outside trip and you just turn the opponent back so that they're coming off the fence and falling down next to it. But Herbert, really hard to keep down, really hard to contain. There was the threat of an arm triangle early on. Paul Felder was busy telling a joke. It was dreadful. But Herbert sprung back up and then he got to work. And the second round especially was hard for Trinaldo. He was getting lit up with those short right straights. Landing good body shots too, but it was proving very hard for him. And I said Herbert last week, 1-2 is clinch work and double collar tie knees. And you saw him open up a huge cut underneath Trinaldo's eye with a nice knee just off the double collar tie. But third round they come out and Trinaldo times the left hand just as Herbert's stepping in to throw his own right hand. Overhand comes down on the middle of the forehead, knocks him stiff. Herbert falls back, doesn't really cover up. He's just doing like a fencing reflex. And Trinaldo, credit to him, steps over him. He's holding one of his wrists with his right hand and he's loading up his left, ready to hit him. And Herb Dean just lets him continue. And the commentators got very angry because there was a very obvious pause where the guy wasn't doing anything. And then he made Trinaldo hit him in the chin like 3 more times. And the aftermath has been really strange. I found out that there are dudes who stan Herb Dean. You've got referee fan bases now apparently. But I'm not here to say that Herb Dean's dreadful at his job. He makes mistakes. It happens. I think we should all accept that refereeing a fight is a very hard job. But it is incredibly concerning that if you make a mistake as a referee, you have to then pretend that you did the right thing and never actually go back on it. So Herb Dean put out this response to Dan Hardy, who was up in his grill afterwards, just being like, actually, what Dan Hardy did is dangerous. And the whole thing, like, people were losing their minds online because Dan Hardy had pissed off people in the week by having a beef with Paulo Costa. But people were just like, yeah, whoa. And you're going, Herb Dean never actually explained why Dan Hardy was in the wrong. He was just like, I think it's unfair that a commentator criticised me on air. I mean, like I said, mistakes will happen. You are in the moment. It's a very, very hard job. And if you just said, I wish I'd got to that sooner, or I might have misread that situation, I think everyone would go, hey, well, it happens. Middle of the fight, lots going on. It's this no, I actually did the right thing. And Dan Hardy is just not qualified to tell me that I did the wrong thing. It's incredibly stupid. But in terms of the fight, I mean, just Trinaldo being Trinaldo, he's always going to be... Well, actually, the drama might actually get some eyes on him, which would be fantastic. But he's always going to be a guy who's underknown in the UFC lightweight division. But you've got to consider that he's been like a top 20, top 25 guy in the UFC lightweight division for, 6-7 years now. Fantastic fights with people like Kevin Lee. I mean, he beat Paul Felder. He's going to be, he might be remembered as something of like a journeyman or a gatekeeper, but he really is one of the toughest fights in one of the toughest divisions in MMA. He should get more attention, but he doesn't. But you're here, so you know better. No point me preaching more to the converted about how great Francisco Trinaldo is. So what else did I enjoy from this card? Tanner Bosa knocked out Rafael Pessoa as he was supposed to. I thought he was interesting. He does little drop shifts into overhand right swings, or I suppose it becomes his right hook. So, yeah. He does a lot of little stance changes into big swing, kind of like a heavyweight Joey Benavidez. Pretty weird watching him do basic movement around the cage and listening to the commentators wax lyrical about his high-level angles and footwork. But yeah, he seems to have a good thing going there, just by being mobile and quick and thoughtful as a heavyweight. Because Pessoa was just there being like, I'm going to try and line up my overhand, and didn't do a fucking thing about it. Though he did land a good back kick to the body at one point. That was out of character. Fabricio Werdum versus Alexander Gustafsson was a strange one, because I saw people after that being like, well, if only Gustafsson had takedown defense. He's pretty good, generally, at defending a takedown. He's also pretty good at moving a lot, so that he's hard to shoot on. But what Fabricio Werdum did here is he basically employed the Raniaya game plan. And if you're a Patreon boy, go read the article we did after Yaya Barboza. Raniaya, really interesting guy, been around. Well, I mean, he's got to be similar age to Fabricio Werdum. They were both around in very early ADCCs, and they're still around, being great. But Raniaya was a guy who used the high crotch head outside single, whatever you want to call it, which can be quite dangerous in pure grappling contests. In grappling and MMA context, in wrestling, the goal is just to get him down or get him flat. Whereas in jiu-jitsu and fighting, the goal is often to get on the guy's back. So it's kind of not a favoured shot in grappling. But as you know, Khabib Nurmagomedov and Daniel Cormier both excel with the high crotch head outside single, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different ways to apply it. John Smith, the legendary John Smith, says that the high crotch is a double leg setup. You should always you go high crotch and then you change off to the double leg and run across. Whereas people like Jake Shields and Daniel Cormier have been very successful using the high crotch as a single leg, threatening to run the pipe, lifting the leg up and trying to trip on the far side, hoisting the leg up and doing an inside trip like a Uchigari on the standing leg, or doing that awesome slam that Cormier always does after he's tried to run the pipe. But the way that Raniaya has been able to use it is that he'll also just sit back and roll underneath the guy into a deep half guard and then come up on the head outside single. So basically, if you grab a head outside single and then you sit to your butt and roll to your back, you're in the deep half guard if you've managed to straighten the leg out. And then if you roll up to your knees again, you're back in the high crotch. So by rolling back and forward, you can make those two openings over and over again. And Ryan Hall's just put out a great new instructional on the modern deep half. And he talks about finishes for the high crotch, which wasn't on his old deep half DVD. But in this one, Fabricio Werdum grabbed the high crotch, sat down, came out the back door, and was coming up on Gustafsson's back with the back body lock. And he got on the back, immediately changed off to the arm bar, and finished. It was really impressive. Which I hate, because I was like, last time Fabricio Werdum turned up, I was like, how dare he turn up in that kind of shape and gas out in one round, blah, blah, blah. And then I said last episode, knowing him, he'll probably come into this one in great shape and win. And he did, the bastard. Amazing Big John take this morning. Someone asked, is Fabricio Werdum the greatest submission artist in heavyweight MMA? And Big John strolled in to say, actually, Oleinik has 42 submissions or whatever it is. And then you go, well, how many of those are chest compressors and no-gi Ezekiels? Because if you get caught in either of those, you're a scrub. Werdum actually submits good guys. So, it's apples and oranges, really. But then that's from the mind that brought you MVP is actually better than Anderson Silva was at MVP's age. And that's the real danger of reffing. It causes CTE. So respect to Herb Dean. Anyway, as I was saying, deep half, still legit in MMA if you use it right. And on the subject of deep half in MMA, I think it's quite appropriate that at the end of their awful third fight, Nogueira and Shogun were locked in a deep half entry. The whole fight was just them trading Nogueira's left hand for Shogun's right kick and right hand and moving at, 10 miles an hour on every shot. It was dire. Like the striking was dire. The wrestling, they couldn't knock each other off balance. They were just dipping onto the other one's hips and getting sprawled on. They were exchanging in the second round and knocked each other over with their shoulders as they were missing punches. But then in the third round, Shogun's on top of him at the end of the round. Little Nog gets the underhook, starts working into deep half, pushes him takes his underhook out and pushes him under the face, the old Nog entry, and goes into deep half. And they're in deep half as the fight and Little Nog's career end. It was pretty cool. Nice ending to what was an unnecessary fight. Right, what's left on this card that was good? Khamzat Chimaev turned it around quickly, came in at welterweight rather than middleweight, and TKO'd Reese McKee in one round, which was good. His last performance everyone loved because he got basically a guy who couldn't really wrestle and wrestled the shit out of him. Alex Oliveira fought Peter Sabota, kept him on the end of the open side round kick and front kick, managed to poke him in the eye, kick him in the balls, and grab the fence. Who are these people, every time I mention Alex Oliveira's constant cheating in the pre-fight, who go, What? What's your problem with Alex Oliveira, Jack? I don't have a problem with him, but if you watch his fights, he cheats all the time. Even when he's winning, which is even more, it's so heelish. Last week I told you that Gadzhimurad Antigulov was Bob Sapp if Bob Sapp made it to the UFC, and that he either wins or gets finished very quickly by gassing out, and then he gassed out in Paul Craig's guard and got triangled. It was great. Took him 2 minutes to get submitted by Paul Craig. He also got boxed up by Paul Craig on the feet, which is a feat if you can do that. Nathaniel Wood against John Castaneda I thought was good fun. Nathaniel Wood landed the most significant strikes of his career, doubled, got 130 significant strikes landed, but I thought Castaneda gave him a good fight. For a last-minute replacement, he did very well. You got the usual Nathaniel Wood looks, right straights, stepping right hooks, stepping right straights, the old karate oizuki, or junzuki, depending on your style. He was landing a couple of those in lots of combination work, low kicks into left hooks as he withdrew the leg. Lovely stuff. Good fence work. I thought Castaneda did some good stuff on the fence, actually. When he got pushed to the fence, he did 2 hands on 1, baseball bat, wrist control, and was able to get himself off the fence nicely. Evloev and Mike Grundy had a decent fight. Mike Grundy almost Japanese, well, I suppose it was a DAS, but had the leg trapped and was cranking the neck, Japanese necktie style in the first round. But then Evloev survived, got up, and put it together for the following 2.5 rounds. Tom Aspinall came out of nowhere and knocked out Jake Collier, but then if you've seen Jake Collier, the shape he was in for this compared to when he was at middleweight, Jesus Christ. And then Jesse Ronson was the nice surprise of the card. He took on Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Dalby, very, very tricky guy with that Kyokushin sort of style. Long stance, nice combination punching, and lots of lead leg high kicking. And Dalby just hung around in the pocket a little too long when he thought he had Ronson on the run. And Ronson stood his ground, threw a couple of punches back, caught him with the left straight down the centre, and knocked him down, and then climbed on his back for the finish. I mean, it's the sort of thing that can happen to anyone if you get caught in an exchange, but good on Jesse Ronson, because he was the lightweight coming in into a welterweight fight against a good welterweight, and managed to put it together. So we got some fights coming up later in the week. I don't know what I want to do for them. Might write something about Edmund Shabazian, because I quite like him. The card is a bit odd, actually. It's sort of like Journeyman, the Journeyman card. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean that in everyone on the card, except for Shabazian, is pretty much not on the way up. Like, they've done the hot prospect thing, and then they've sort of like adjusted to their level, or fallen back to where they belong. But I'll have something coming. So if you want to get in on the Patreon, support the podcast, and read all the things, / listen to all the things we do in the week, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Carla Esparza's ankle lock attempts bless.